Welcome to this week's episode of Unfortunately Required Reading. As usual, we've just been shit-talking for 15 minutes before this started.
I mean, there has to be some foreplay to the episode. You can't go in dry with Jane Austen. You can't!
This week we are covering Pride and Prejudice, or as I'm calling it, Not So Quiet Aunt Jane.
Yeah, she's fine, I guess.
She's
I have better feelings about her than I do, Charlotte Bronte?
Which one? The one from last time? I think it was Emily.
Oh, fuck. Whatever Bronte. Insert Bronte.
I will admit that I have been converted to the light side. I now very much enjoy Jane Austen, which is startling for me. Because I think last week I was like, oh my god, I have to read Pride and Prejudice again.
I actually had to trace my memory. I thought that I had read this before, and I haven't.
Oh.
So, I mentioned that after a while, all Brit Lit runs together for me in an amorphous blob of bonnets. It truly is bonnets all the way down.
As John Green said.
I don't hate this, but I definitely don't think it's as revolutionary as some people have said. I'll say that. I don't think that it's as progressive as some people like to give it credit for. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I made scones.
She did! Amanda made scones.
And they look like a strange southern biscuit, which I'm not mad about, because I got up very early this morning and made scones. There's also clotted cream, which is, if I'm understanding correctly, it's cream that is cooked almost like butter, but not really butter. Like, it's heavy cream. Yeah, some of it's separated.
I'm going to try this out.
And it's a shockingly expensive import from England. There's also blackcurrant jam. Now, while I was on Sophie the Magpie's live stream, I mentioned that I was making scones. Yes, it was I. It was I that set the house ablaze. Which is my favorite meme. Of a fluffy cat being pulled from a burning house with a shocked face that says, "'Twas I that set the house ablaze." That is my favorite meme of all time. There was quite a discussion over current events, and by current, I mean black or red currants. And also where you put the jam matters apparently a great deal, because apparently in England there is not a Brexit to be concerned about. There's just a lot of talk of where jam goes, whether it goes under the cream or over the cream, or if you use jam at all. So, like, I also have lemon curd here because I love lemon curd.
Lemon curd is delicious.
How's the scone?
It's really good.
I'm so glad.
I like it because your version isn't, like, super dry and crumbly.
No, like, that's the thing. It's just, there's a great episode of a Good Eats before I realized that Alton Brown hates millennials, that he talks a lot about, like, biscuits. It's a great biscuit episode. So if you ever want to learn how to make biscuits, I don't remember what the episode is, but it's, like, early, top to top. Like, early Good Eats, where he makes biscuits, and he talks about, like, the difference between, like, scones and biscuits, and it's a fantastic example of how the South has taken something that England tried to ruin and truly made it great. The South will rise again, and in that way, we know how to make the best bread. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. So we are being quiet because we're gathering up scones, because it truly is about to be bonnets all the way down.
I'm very excited about this. So I'm doing the jam with the cream over it.
I'm not mad.
I'm very happy with it.
Yeah. So, get you a man who will make you scones at 8 o'clock in the morning, which Tori has successfully done.
Amen.
And has only just spent $8 on clotted cream from Central Market. World Market, sorry.
World Market, Central Market, we've got both.
We have all the markets. I think lemon curd is phenomenal.
I'm going to have to try that next.
So, get out your bingo cards, because I think we're going to start doing prizes for this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm excited about it. I'm holding the jar for Tori because I'm a good person.
What I would recommend is if you are doing the bingo cards, you take a picture of it, you share it on Twitter, and you hashtag it bingo card, but you make sure that you direct it to us. Otherwise, we will never see it. Also, in the slew of posts, I assume 80-year-old women are posting about bingo cards.
Also, join us next week where I torture myself and watch the Netflix adaptation of Dracula by Stephen Moffat.
I'm so excited for this.
I will be live tweeting, and I will be drunk. in my own home.
On Rex Goliath Sweet Red?
On Rex Goliath Sweet Red. And the greasiest pizza I can find.
At this point in time, too, we are also drinking it's the Jane Austen.
It's from a listicle of cocktails inspired by authors. And this is the Jane Austen. It's rosewater, gin, and Earl Grey tea syrup, and topped with like rosé. I'm not mad at it. I added too much rosewater.
It's very rosy.
So follow the recipe, because I was doubling. Follow the recipe, and if you make only one glass, it only asks for 2 dashes of rosewater. That's probably just enough. I added too much because 1, I'm Southern, and 2, I don't know what the fuck a dash is. Like, what is... I think metrically a dash is like 1/8 of a teaspoon.
See, for some reason, every time you say dash, all I can think of is that episode of The Simpsons where she's like, tappa, tappa, tappa. And I don't know why.
I don't know why either. So it's very floral. I don't hate it, though.
I'm looking for any excuse to eat before I start doing a short story long, because scones are like my favorite thing.
You want me to start the short story long so you can eat?
No, I got it.
Okay, I trust you. I made her scones. I did the right thing. I'm so glad.
Amanda did the right thing.
I made scones.
I'm going to set it down, and then I'm going to look at it longingly, the way that Mr. Darcy secretly looks at Elizabeth Bennet.
At the very end. Spoilers.
Spoilers. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet live with 5 daughters and with financially precarious situation, because when Mr. Bennet dies, the entire property will go to a male cousin due to current inheritance laws at the time. So the daughters all either need to marry rich husbands or be screwed by English law. The estate will go to their cousin, Mr. Collins. So basically they can be poor or end up as governesses if they don't get married. Mr. Bingley shows up and brings along his friend Mr. Darcy. They rent the house that's like next door. It's like a really nice manor house. Mr. Bingley falls in love with Jane Bennet. Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth fall into hate at first sight due to a miscommunication and Mr. Darcy's constant scowl. Jane goes to the Bingley house for tea, but as her mother makes her go there without a carriage in the rain, she gets sick and is their guest for several days. Elizabeth is worried about her sister, so she walks to the house and takes care of her, but quickly learns that the Bingley sisters are terrible snobs and not to be trifled with. A much better Jane and Elizabeth return home, with the belief that Jane and Mr. Bingley will soon be engaged. Elizabeth goes to town with her sisters, Lydia and Kitty, and runs into Wickham, a soldier who claims to have been wronged pretty badly by Darcy. Elizabeth goes, yes, okay, I have proof that he's a dick. So Elizabeth's cousin, Mr. Collins, comes to have dinner with them, and Elizabeth gets a proposal from Mr. Collins. He is, the one I mentioned at the beginning, he's going to inherit the estate, but he's terrible and annoying as all get out and won't stop talking about his patroness. Elizabeth emphatically declines the proposal, but her best friend Charlotte Lucas steps in and marries Mr. Collins. Mr. Bingley disappears, breaking Jane's heart, and so to feel better, Jane goes to London to spend time with her family in town. But she finds out after trying to visit the Bingleys who are there, she finds out that they are intentionally avoiding her. Elizabeth goes to visit Mr. Collins and Charlotte and meets Lady Catherine, Mr. Darcy's snobby aunt. She sees Mr. Darcy and he proposes marriage in a super insulting way, so Elizabeth insults him right back and tells him no way in hell. She also finds out Darcy conspired to break up Jane and Mr. Bingley, which is super shady. So Darcy suddenly, after this whole fight about we're not getting married, kerfluffle, Darcy feels the need to explain himself and why he did what he did to Wickham. So he ends up writing a whole letter, which is the most passive aggressive shit, and handing it to Elizabeth. So it turns out that Wickham was going to run off with Darcy's 15-year-old sister to get all her money because he used to live at the house with his family, and he blew through money and was totally a womanizer. So when all this is going on, they find out that Elizabeth's super stupid sister, Lydia, runs off with Wickham, and to save her reputation, which they don't know, somebody steps in and pays a bunch of money, which is evidently Mr. Darcy, who pays Wickham to marry Lydia, so it'll save her reputation. Meanwhile, Lady Catherine shows up and gets in Elizabeth's face and asks if Mr. Darcy has asked her to marry him or if she's engaged. She tells her, no, we're not engaged, and Lady Catherine insists Elizabeth promise she'd never accept him. Elizabeth basically rolls her eyes and tells Lady Catherine she won't promise that to get out of there. Jane and Mr. Bingley get reunited and get married, and Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy fall in love because of the wonders of what he did for her sister and the fact that he's rich as fuck, and they get married. The end.
Also known as plot clairvoyance.
Plot clairvoyance.
Now, I have a question.
Yes.
Now, I did read the book this time.
Yay!
Pat on the back if my shoulder, if my arms are too short to reach. They are. Thank you for patting me on the back. I don't really get the insult in an insulting way, because the way John Green illustrates it in Crash Course that that Mr. Darcy proposes with Burger King onion rings.
Pretty much.
Okay, cool.
So basically what he does is he goes up to her and he's like, okay, so against my better judgment, the judgment of my family and friends, your family is absolute shit, but I'm totally in love with you. And she's like, why the fuck would you say that to me?
Okay, he's just a dick. Got it. Because, I mean, I read the dick part, but I didn't read it as such of a high insult because I'm a creature of the internet and I've been told many worse things for much less.
Oh, yeah, no, literally, if you're a girl dating on OkCupid, it's like, hey girl, whatever, you're fat anyway. What? Like, literally, I didn't respond to you in 10 seconds? Like, I'm confused.
I had a guy, after 2 messages, say I like women's feet.
I had a guy, after 2 messages, ask me to come to his dungeon.
I actually might accept that.
I was not.
Applications are still open for a Scotsman or a Welshman to sweep me off of my feet. Though I am quite heavy, so if you actually physically can sweep me off my feet, more power to you, sir.
Is this going to be like a Red Sonja thing anytime it has to best you in battle, or?
That's what happened with my second boyfriend when we met during the Texas Junior Classics League.
That's right.
Yeah, I beat him in a gladiatorial match and I had him pinned. And he said, I love you. That literally happened.
So, at the risk of making you quit the show, I refer to Wickham as Dickham a lot because he's like really into prepubescent girls and it weirds me out.
Okay, is this an instance where we throw the dreaded it was a different time flag?
Can we not? Because he's creepy.
Okay, but I think we have to.
But he was creepy.
Okay, yes, I understand that, but I think we have to throw the it was a different time flag on the field.
I mean, I get it. Kitty makes a big deal about being the first one to get married. And she's so young. And I'm like, fuck off.
But I mean, like, think about what... So we'll talk about, like, whether this is feminist or not.
Lydia, sorry.
Like, Kitty Pride?
No, Kitty is just young and silly. No, Lydia's the dick.
She's fine. Like, why do you hate all these women?
I don't. I just hate Lydia.
And Lady Catherine.
Well, I like Lady Catherine. She's just an asshole. But she's a rich asshole who gets what she wants, so I don't hate her there.
She's Cersei Lannister.
She's Cersei Lannister in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Right. I mean, I don't know. We can call him that. I do think that we have to put on the it was a different time card. I'm not happy about it, but I think, like, legally, if we had to consult our lawyers, which we have neither.
Yeah, we don't have lawyers.
Yeah.
Please don't sue us. You'll only get, like, half of a bag of Burger King onion rings and, like, maybe a Diet Coke.
I can apparently make scones, so you get that in the settlement, I suppose.
What's left of this Devon cream?
This is very expensive Devon cream. As someone who imports a lot of goods from other places, I'm always very aware of the fact that things are expensive. There is no reason why something that has, like, 3 ingredients should cost as much as it does. None whatsoever. And it's more of me kicking myself for not just making it, because as soon as I Googled where to buy it, there was, like, 5 recipes of just how to make it at home. So I should have just made it at home.
I kind of feel like if I ever go back to England, I'm just going to load up a suitcase full of clotted cream and just be like, sell it on the black market in San Antonio.
Can I just say, I know that you're a Yankee by the way that you put an emphasis on San Antonio.
Yeah, we all know this.
I started noticing it as I was listening to episodes of the pod. I'm like, every once in a while I forget that Tori's a damn Yankee.
Mm-hmm.
And then she says San Antonio. And I am reminded.
I have another podcast and I have to basically constantly deny that I'm originally from California.
I mean, you never said Bexar County.
I said that the very first time I drove into this county. And then I went, well, that can't be right. And when the radio station went, Bear County, I went, oh, that's how you say that. It's like Texas. Yeah,
it's like the Try Guys when they were trying to pronounce where Eugene is from, because Eugene from formerly BuzzFeed is actually from Pflugerville.
Oh.
Yeah, we can claim him. He's one of ours. And, like, the Try Guys are, like, all the, like, mostly, like, California or Midwest guys, like, trying to pronounce Pflugerville is just...
The Pflugerville?
The Flogger. Do you want to talk about some theming?
Let's talk about some themes.
So, we legally have to call this a romance novel.
Well, what is it, a sensibility novel? Or a sensational novel?
Sure.
Sure.
I don't find it very tantalizing. I will say I do like the idea of not everyone falling in love at first sight. That is nice because that is a suspension of disbelief issue that I do have with a lot of books. I do personally think it is incredibly undercut by the ending. That's just me. But also like so I don't think we talk a lot about like reading lenses, like theoretical ways to look at things. So one of the things that I'm really big on is like reader response criticism. So your personal experience as reader will always color how you approach a work. Mm-hmm. Always. You cannot separate yourself as reader from any work. Hello, screaming child outside.
We're not torturing children. It's literally just the next door neighbor's kids.
I might be mentally. I don't know.
You're glaring at them.
Right.
It's like Carrie.
Yes. So me as reader with my tumultuous dating history, which I can admit, I personally am too cynical to appreciate a happy ending. I think this was great because it doesn't have everyone fall in love immediately. And then they get to the ending and it's sort of like a Jane Eyre a little bit, where I was fine with it. Well, fine, I used air quotes. Until that ending. Like if we had just cut out that ending where suddenly everyone ships off, I think I'd be like, this isn't terrible. But love is a big thing in this, and it's a very I know that critics say that it isn't a very capital R romantic love of like feelings being overwhelming. But this might just be the modern person in me. It feels very saccharine.
And she, like, Jane Austen liked to play with those concepts a lot as well. Mm-hmm. And just make it more, like, there's just these little digs that you kind of pick up as you're going through, where she'll throw something out there. Like, the fact that when she's walking with Caroline Bingley in the house, and he's like, well, there's only 2 reasons I can think that you guys would be walking around the house. One of them is it shows off your figure. And they're like, oh, you're so gross. But internally, they're like, yeah, that's what we're doing. Like, Mr. Bingley's, or Mrs. Caroline Bingley is doing that.
Yeah, I do think that Jane Austen is a better writer than Emily Bronte.
I now concur.
Thank you.
I used to be hardcore Bronte. Hardcore. It was like Charlotte and Emily forever. I'm sorry, I still have to read Anne, guys. And then now I'm like, oh, I don't hate Jane Austen. Okay.
I mean, I as someone who doesn't like Brit-lit, this was tolerable, much like Mr. Darcy. It was tolerable.
Mr. Darcy kind of just feels like lukewarm tea. Like, there's probably still some benefits in it, but you kind of wish it was a little hotter.
How much hotter does Colin Firth need to be?
Okay, Colin Firth is a whole other thing.
We were jumping.
I apologize. I apologize in advance. I'm gonna not make this a Gary Oldman.
I will. But
Colin Firth is beautiful, beautiful man.
Yeah, I think the hard on that you have for Gary Oldman, I have for Colin Firth,
and I don't blame you. He's beautiful. He makes it hard to hate Mr. Darcy,
and I think that's kind of a problem. I think it kind of. So there's this thing called framing in media where, depending on how an action is framed using either rhetorical devices or like screen tricks in movies, it tells you how to feel about something. So if a woman is being brutalized, but all of the lighting in the movie is very soft and the music is soft and everything is soft, your brain cognitively disassociates and doesn't think that it's an act of violence. And framing is a huge problem in media because it tends to color perception of things. Hence, like, why a lot of women being brutalized in, like, Law and Order and stuff like that is very sexualized. Because that's a bad frame to view this. And now we then take that into our daily lives and think that when women die, it's kind of hot. That's a whole problem. I do think that Colin Firth, being as attractive as he is, does negatively impact much of a shitlord Darcy could be.
What I've kind of appreciated now that I'm a little bit older is Darcy basically going, I am really bad with people. I am bad with people. I don't have anything against you. I don't know you, so I'm not going to tell you my innermost secrets. And I get that now, but like you're reading the story and you're like, God, why are you such a dick to everyone you meet?
Yeah.
It's just he literally does not have that social grace or emotional understanding. There's no emotional intelligence in his initial interactions with people.
Yeah, I think a lesser writer like Moffat would assume he's a sociopath.
I like how Moffat constantly uses sociopath and psychopath incorrectly.
I said that intentionally to get a rise out of Tori. I said that intentionally to get a rise out of my very own
River Song is not a psychopath. She's not.
And I don't think that Sherlock is a sociopath.
Sherlock is not a sociopath.
He's an asshole.
He's an asshole. He's bad with people. He's probably on the spectrum someplace.
And he's clearly gay for Watson.
It's like... I don't know.
He's obviously married to Watson.
So one of the other things that we have to talk about definitely is class.
Yes.
Something that's really interesting is when people read this book, they often think that the Bennett family is higher up than they are. And yeah, they have one or two servants, but at this period of time, the whole big deal is that she is technically not high enough class for Mr. Darcy and his family and things like that. Bingley is rich as fuck. Like, he, Darcy, Lady Catherine, they're all up at this higher echelon of people as far as class goes for the time period. So the Bennets are doing pretty well, but they're not considered to be high enough up. And especially having 5 daughters versus having a son of any sort, they're in tough shape because that estate is going to go someplace else. Now, we don't really have that now.
Yes,
but
we do.
To some extent. But at that point in time, it's a really big deal. And you see a lot of this in Downton Abbey as well, where it's like...
The best version of this? The
best version of this. Oh, well, your cousin just happens to be so very attractive and you're going to get married and now everything is saved because you have a son. Like...
I will say, as much as I don't always agree with John Green's interpretation of things, in the second part of the Crash Course episode on this book, he does break down like the economics of this, and I think it's great. If you're having a hard time visualizing, which in all fairness, I kind of did too, he does a great breakdown of like, the Bennets bring in about this much a year, and like Darcy brings in about this much a year, like, and it helps put like a monetary air quotes amount on this stuff because it does just sort of feel like a bunch of rich people faffing around.
And that's like when Mrs. Bennet is losing her absolute shit over how much money Bingley makes a year and then realizing that he might make more and that her kids, because one of her daughters is going to be associated with high society, then all of her daughters might be associated with high society. And Darcy hears that part and gets really weird and tries to break up Jane and Mr. Bingley. But it's very much, she's very much watching it from a mother's perspective of, my kids are going to be fucked. And Mrs. Hi, fireworks in our neighborhood. Welcome to San Antonio. Everyone in this book, whether or not they acknowledge money, is very concerned with money. Even Mr. Collins, where he's acting like, oh, you know, you're totally eligible for this much money a year if we get married. But I don't even think about that. It's like, bullshit, you don't think about that. You spend all of your time at Lady Catherine's house. Like, calm down.
So basically just watch Downton Abbey and watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Oh, and then Charlotte Lucas is her.
What in God's name?
Okay, I don't know if that's fireworks or gunshots now.
That's fireworks. If you visit our Amazon wish list, we have some sound dampening panels that we would love. If you care about our sanity and your sound quality, please feel free to send us a gift. We do greatly appreciate it.
I love your shameless plugs. I'll actually link our Amazon wish list.
On Dear Hank and John, the dynamic of the two brothers is that John is the shameless whore and will plug anything anyone is doing, and Hank is like the one who's desperately trying to get back on topic, and I'm definitely in this scenario the John Green.
Yes, you are the John Green.
I'm the shameless attention whore who will plug a stick in the middle of the street.
I'm like, if you want to support us, that's really cool. But also...
And I'm like, give me money and I'll show you my ankles, you thirsty fucks.
We had gloves on at the start of this episode.
Like a couple of fetishists.
It's too hot in this room.
It's not that hot.
So...
Tori is a sensitive and genteel lady.
Listen, I am an orchid. I am a hothouse flower. Anyway.
Delicate and will die out of spite?
Yes, actually. So there's a lot of gender politics in this as well.
There's a shocking amount of gender politics in this. Because basically you get this rule where 5 girls does not equal 1 man. And that's a bitter pill to swallow. Nearly as aggressive as this rose water in this cocktail.
Fair. And the fact that we have Elizabeth Bennet, who is incredibly intelligent, very well read. She learned most of her stuff from her father. He trained Jane and Elizabeth to both be very smart, be able to hold their own. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of see this separation where Mary is caught in the middle. Mary is the sister who's very much like, I'm never getting married. I'm going to go to the church or something. Like, she's very pulled into herself. But then you have Kitty and Lydia, who spend most of their time with their mom, who are like, we're going to go get married. Like, that is the most important thing to them. They're going to go flirt with officers, dance, eat at fancy parties, and then get married probably to an officer. That's like their big thing.
I think for me, this makes a lot of sense growing up in like Southern debutante culture. Like, this makes a lot of sense to me, but it also might be why I hate it so much. Because this absolutely feels like just being raised in a Southern family. Of you have no worth outside of who you marry. Anything that you do to enrich yourself is just enriching your husband. And just being overly concerned with the worth of men versus the inherent worth of women. And I get it was a different time, but it's frustrating because there are people that still feel this way. Mm-hmm. If you need a good fleshing out of Southern debutante culture, shockingly, BoJack Horseman does a great job of it with BoJack's mom. It's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, and I cried a lot through a lot of those episodes, but it's a great, almost biting satire of that Southern culture that anything that you do is to enrich yourself to be more attractive to women. Also see the opening of Mulan during the Matchmaker song.
Well, it's interesting, too. I mean, even up until, God, I want to say the 60s, they used to tease women who went to college and say, you don't have to go get your degree in communications to get your MRS.
That's it, get your MRS.
And I'm like, whoa. Meanwhile, like, I went to college in the early 2000s and was able to get my degree in 3 years. Nobody ever said that shit to me.
Wait, the early 2000s?
Graduated high school in 2003.
I just became very aware of the age difference between Tori and I.
I know.
I entered high school in 2004.
Aww. You're a sweet baby.
I just became violently aware of the age difference between Tori and I.
Can I be Lady Catherine then?
Yes, sure.
Okay, cool. I'm going to interrupt all of our conversations and demand that you play the piano thing she has.
A harpsichord?
I don't know what it was. I don't know.
Tori, I woke up this morning and I made you scones. I really don't know what else you want from me.
I love this so much.
So gender politics is a thing. I don't think that Jane Austen, again, is a good enough writer for it. And by good enough, I don't mean that she was bad. Just like she was writing what was contemporary to her, which is now a reductive and unfortunate view of women.
And the funny thing is, too, a lot of her drafts that she would initially write, she would have to go back and rewrite. There's a whole series of letters that she wrote to her sister Cassandra about, I don't know how much money I should say that this person makes a year because I don't know, because I used to say it was this much, but now I think it might be this much would be better. Because she was trying to keep it contemporary as she was writing. Things were changing so quickly at the time period.
Yeah, and I mean, I even have this as a fiction writer a little bit where I'll write male characters, but I'll still write them in a lot of passive roles because I only know the passive role of being biologically female. I could never, even though in gender I get to make play as a man a lot, I will never have the same socialization to know what it's like to be able to put my metaphorical dick on a table and get what I want. I will never know that. I will never know the socialization that ingratiates me so much to feeling like I've earned anything, that a woman is a tool or an item or anything like that. I will never know that.
I just had this image of you taking a device and plotting it on a table and being like, give me what I want!
That's just Sundays when they have to be cleaned in the dishwasher.
There you go.
You can't put them in the dishwasher. What?
Things I learned today.
Yeah, you can put some of them. You can put some of them in the dishwasher.
Does it say on the box, like, dishwasher safe?
Actually, some of them do. I'm not joking.
Do you just have like a special shelf in the dishwasher for dildos?
You use the one that you put like baby bottles on, so you can store multiples.
I would like to apologize to anyone under the age of 18 who's currently listening to this.
I'd like to apologize to any family, friends, or future employers who are listening to this. Well, close friends, no. Close friends, no.
They all know what's our problem.
They all know. So that's some gender politics. I'll talk about courtship because Tori just took a giant bite of scone and I'm trying to save her. You can have the rest of the scones. Okay. I'm trying to keep Tori happy. I bake scones. There's a multiplicity of spreads here. I'm displaying my wealth as Mr. Darcy would have. I'm doing the least amount of effort and it is received with maximum gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
I truly have gone back to being the Mr. Darcy.
Yes.
I've done the minimal amount of effort and I've gotten the maximum amount in return.
It's true. 100%.
Thank you. So courtship, this is the Regency era, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But when we think about like romance being this highfalutin thing of like gentle palm touches and like leaving locks of hair and shit like that, that's high Regency. Like the high drama of courtship and writing letters and blah blah blah. There are some great documentaries on the Regency era, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the tokens of affection and stuff like that, the pageantry of courtship is very important. Which is why when people don't do it correctly, like Darcy, it's perceived very ill.
And it's very similar to with Lydia, who instead of following the rules of courtship, runs off with Wickham and lives with him without being married. And it's like such a big scandal to her family. Like her family is like, we are going to be ruined.
Right.
And this doesn't just ruin like Lydia's hopes, it ruins everybody's hopes.
Right. See also Japanese culture when it comes to dating and relationships, and also see Southern culture when it comes to dating and relationships. Because like in Japan, you saw like marriage applications, and like it's treated like a business transaction a lot of the times, honestly. Oh, filling out a marriage application is a great way to feel like you are worthless as a creature.
What?
So it's almost like submitting like an OkCupid profile, but like imagine you are in like a livestock show, but you have to grade yourself.
Oh.
So like you have to list what kind of debt you have. Is it good debt or bad debt? How much debt? You have to list any medical issues. Height, weight, eye color, family, how far back you can trace your family, whether you're educated, up to what level, what's your degree in. Like it honestly does feel like grading yourself for a livestock show, but like in all of the worst ways. So like, at least for me, the positives are I do have debt, but it's mostly good debt. I am educated up to an undergraduate degree. My family, from what I can trace, at least on one side, is pretty okay from the part where we were legal citizens in America in 1865. So I do have those things going for me. The things I don't have going for me are that one, I'm old now. Now I'm old. And two, I have a laundry list of medical issues. So I'm not quite unmarriageable, but quickly approaching.
Pretty unmarriageable. Then again, I am.
You're already married. You don't have to do the application.
Woo! One of the things that I find super interesting, having gone back through this book again, is when Mr. Collins is proposing to Elizabeth, and she's like, no, I'm not going to do this. And he goes into the whole thing, oh, I know, you fashionable ladies like to play coy and say no. And she's like, legitimately no, back the fuck away. And he's like, it's okay, I'll come back and ask another time. And she's like, go away.
This is still a thing that men do?
And I yes, OkCupid for sure. Hey, yeah. Thanks, you seem really nice, but I'm just not interested. Well, let me give you all the reasons why you should be. No, I'm good, thanks though. I love that Mr. Bennet does the whole thing of, your mother will never speak to you again if you don't marry him, and I'll never speak to you again if you do. Because
you can't win.
Because he hates Mr. Collins so much. Like, when he's doing, like, the high steps and stuff in the book, and also in every movie adaptation, you're just going, no. I will say Matt Smith is the best Mr. Collins, because he plays it so straight-faced that you're like, wow, this guy's a massive dick. He jumps real high, though.
He does. He's here. All of this is so dumb, but I kind of love it.
Oh, I needed this. I've been reading about the gulags and...
Okay, but that's on you. No one has condemned you to a gulag of your own design.
No, this is all my fault. And my husband's like, please stop reading those books. Oh my gosh, if I have to hear one more fact about Russia.
I just glanced over and found the Pre-Raphaelite shelf.
Oh, yeah.
I glanced over and I found it. There's some...
And there's still more books in the other room.
Do we need to make that amendment to the bingo card? Is you somehow bring up Pre-Raphaelite?
I didn't this time. It
was me, but you tricked me. So some historical context. This is the Regency period. We've said it a few times now. This was during the time of England when George III went crazy.
Yes.
He was not always crazy. Tori's putting back on the glove for some reason.
Because we're talking about the Regency period.
Okay, well, I'm going to be a deviant to keep the glove off.
Okay.
Basically, there's a lot of fancy dining, there's a lot of drinking, and there's also a lot of concern that maybe a lot of this stuff is bad. So we mentioned that a little bit when we mentioned temperance during the Bronte episode. And now we're starting to become even more concerned. By we, I mean people who reached England. I'm a black deviant. I wouldn't have been allowed. This is just true. We're now even more concerned with those things because we see the excess of George, who was Hanoverian, I believe. Or was he Stuart? I think he was Stuart. I don't remember anymore. There's a great documentary called Fit to Rule, hosted by Dr. Lucy Worsley, who is amazing, and I love her.
She also does a really good special on Jane Austen, which we'll link to as well.
Yes, which we've skipped over. Basically, there's fancy parties, there's a lot of gin, there's a lot of imports from the New World, there's a lot of opium as well, because China, there's just a lot of stuff. It's an interesting period of history that you should look at.
Hanoverian monarch.
I was right with Hanover the first time.
Yes.
Which was bastardized from German. Mm-hmm. So, congratulations. The English crown is not English.
Hasn't been for some time.
It has not been. So, it's actually a really, really fascinating piece of history. I would definitely say there is a part about Stuart to Hanoverian, then Hanoverian to Windsor. That is just those two segments of Fit to Rule. I say watch all of Fit to Rule, which goes from Tudor to Stuart, from Stuart to Hanoverian, from Hanoverian to Windsor. Watch all of it and just have a great fucking afternoon.
Yes.
Because Dr. Worsley is phenomenal.
And she goes to a lot of different places and talks very in-depth with experts, and just, she has so much enthusiasm, it's hard not to get into it.
But she's also really empathetic. Like, I started the Hanoverian episode where they mentioned the death of Queen Charlotte back then, not the new baby one, the one back in the olden times. Mm-hmm. And she handles it with such empathy that, like, I actually started tearing up a little bit. Because it was just such a tragic way that she died. There's also a lot of parallels between Charlotte and Diana that's very uncomfortable, including dead princess teapots.
Yes.
Which is a thing that I want. If you...
Okay, explain to them what a dead princess teapot is.
So, during the time when Charlotte passed away, there was a lot of rush to memorialize her, because she was very beloved. Again, like Diana. Mm-hmm. Like, she was down to being analogized to the English Rose. Like, she was very popular because her brother and dad weren't. So there was this hope that with Charlotte that she would really bring together a new vision of the English royal family. And she was pregnant. She actually loved her husband, which was something that didn't really exist back then. But she genuinely loved her husband, and she was set to deliver a baby. It went horribly wrong. The baby died, and then she died a day or two later. And it broke the heart of England collectively. So there was a lot of memorabilia around her death, including these teapots that feature, like, a weeping Britannia and, like, just her face on everything. her husband opened up one of the castle grounds of where she loved to visit. And there were so many people that visited and took pieces of rock from one of the grottos she loved that the ceiling is gone now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there was this beautiful blue ceiling to one of the grottos that she visited a great deal. And so many people broke off pieces of that grotto that blue is gone. And we tend not to think about it that way anymore. But, like, there are so many uncomfortable parallels to Diana that you have to kind of give credit to it. But yeah, that's Charlotte. That was very, very sad. But that sparked my fascination with Dead Princess Teapots. Just because I think the way that cultures and countries remember people is so fascinating. And I especially love that in death, it seems to kind of bring everyone together. Like, I remember when John McCain died, and it kind of being this moment of, regardless of what side of the aisle you were on, you can acknowledge that this man served his country and that he died. And if you have to leave it at that to maintain respect, you do, and that's where you go. There's this beautiful unification sometimes in death, whether it's in celebration and adulation or in a genuine mourning and sadness. So that's the Regency era in a nutshell. There's a lot of really, really interesting things in there. There's also a list that I found of a bunch of weird things that happened during the Regency era, like something that was very in vogue was to watch pineapples rot.
Yes. Yes, it was a really big deal to be able to afford a pineapple because it had to be imported.
Mm-hmm.
And then you basically would just leave it on your table and let it go. But because it was just a symbol of, oh, look, I have this wealth, I can import this.
Right.
It's amazing. And it's like, but it's really delicious.
Yeah.
Maybe you should eat that.
Yeah. So we'll probably link that list in the show notes as well, because it's just fascinating. So that's Regency. It's a good time.
During this period, too, you were starting to see the retreat of agrarian culture to more industrial. Rights of women were starting to become a big thing, as you would see with Wollstonecraft. And Jane Austen is the most famous writer of this period.
I'm so glad that you brought up Mary Wollstonecraft.
I love her. She's like awesome.
Who is?
Vindication of the Rights of Women, the mother of our lovely Mary Shelley who wrote Frankenstein.
Excellent work.
But also an amazing human being in her own right.
Yeah, I do kind of hate that there doesn't seem to be a middle ground when it comes to her, that either she's just the badass feminist or she is the womb that gave us Mary Shelley.
What I love is if you try to read Vindication of the Rights of Women, it's still very reachable today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, which was really cool because I'm thinking, oh my God, it's going to be all this language that I'm going to have to parse through.
No,
it's fine.
It's very manageable. Most of my essays in college were through a feminist lens, because obviously. So I've read that multiple times.
So this is me getting really excited. Jane Austen was born December 16th, 1775. She was a Sagittarius. Suck it! Anyway, the weather was really bad at that time period, so she didn't get baptized until April. And this was really only a big deal because she was born to an Anglican clergyman and his wife. Jane Austen's initial life was really crazy because her dad ran a school for boys out of their home in Parsonage. So there was always something going on. She was mostly taught at home, but she did go to a year or so of boarding school with her sister Cassandra, and she started writing plays and novels and juvenilia and all sorts of stuff. She loved books, music, and dancing per her letters and notes to her sister. Something to keep in mind, balls in the home, like you see these massive rooms and stuff in a lot of the movies and adaptations for Jane Austen stories. But usually they were held in much smaller rooms than you expected.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like a family room or something where they just moved all the furniture to the side and just everybody kind of hung out and then collapsed into chairs as the night was going on. And a lot of times they would have like their tables set up and they'd have to have multiple tables in one room. So it'd be like having a really big family gathering.
Yes.
So when Jane Austen turned 20, she met Tom Lefroy, who was a young law student. She saw him at a bunch of balls, but the flirtation ended very, very quickly. Her family was fine, but his family did not approve. So he didn't propose, which she was very surprised by. And he had to end up marrying somebody richer than Jane to support his 10 siblings. So in her world, money really did come before love. And that's right after the Tom Lefroy breakup. That was when she started writing Pride and Prejudice, her first draft of it. So a lot of personal feelings thrown in there, which may be why she has such a happy ending, other than the fact that that would be considered to be more publishable.
Sure. I think we will need to cross a bridge one of these days over our varying views of authorial intent.
Yes. She wrote a lot in the epistolary style.
Like Dracula.
Yeah, exactly like Dracula. It's where you write things through letters and news articles and things like that. She was worried when Pride and Prejudice was published that it was too frivolous. She described it as, quote, rather too light and bright and sparkling, which I think is hysterical.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a slog to me, but I can see how she feels that way. Jane also basically created this thing called free and direct discourse, which is like third-person omniscient, but better. And I realize that is something that I, as a writer, do a lot. And if I have to explain, like, the different points of view when it comes to reading, you have first person, which is your I, me. You have second person, which is you and your. You see that more in fan fiction. Like, you don't get a lot of novels written in you, or, like, choose your own stories, which are very, very rare nowadays.
Unless it's that Carolyn Kapnia, I think, book, that you or Hidden Bodies, the TV show they just did on Netflix. Anyway.
Right, and then your third person can either be third person limited, which is you kind of stick to, I guess, one point of view third person, and you know their opinions and views, and really no one else's. Or there's third person omniscient, where it feels like God is watching this scene. Most books are written in third person omniscient, just because it's easy. And this free and direct discourse, I realize, like, when I look at my own writing, I do this a lot, and I have to give Jane Austen credit. I'm not happy about it, but I have to. I have no choice. And then in Crash Course, John Green says this book feels like it's written by your funny and mean best friend.
And it's true, and I think that's maybe why I like it so much now, is it's like these little jabs and digs and descriptions of people that you're like, okay, that's how I would have described it if I wasn't being nice.
I guess because I am most people's funny but mean best friend.
It's not wrong.
I do still think she's kind of throwing softballs at things, because here's a point on your bingo card where I wrote in Game of Thrones. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that I am just Olenna Tyrell.
You are. Oh, the lemon cakes will come out after the cheese. The lemon cakes will come out when I say the lemon cakes will come out.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that I'm just Olenna Tyrell. So there's a lot of lines where you're like, ooh, that's scathing. It's like, no, it's not. That person hasn't cried yet.
That's true.
But also, again, I'm Olenna Tyrell, so I'm going to be a lot harsher. So as everyone's funny but mean best friend, it's fine. It definitely could be meaner. No one has cried.
She was meaner in her letters, supposedly.
She was very mean in her letters, which most of them were burned.
Yes.
Stop. John Green mentions this, but I have to agree. If you have a friend or a family member who's a writer, and realistically, even if they say explicitly burn upon my death, don't burn that shit.
Well, Cassandra is either beloved or hated for this, her sister, because she took it to heart. She buried a lot of the really mean letters and things that she felt that nobody needed to know.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was like, I want to do right by my sister's opinions and my sister in general, which is so funny because then when her nephew ends up writing this book, it's like, oh, quiet Aunt Jane, she was so devout, such a wonderful woman, and she never did this and she never did that.
Like, Aunt Jane was a bitch.
Meanwhile, Jane is writing about being hungover after parties, which I think is amazing. And then we get the lovely Twitter now by the group Drunk Austen.
I love Drunk Austen so much.
Oh my gosh. And they started following us, and I love you, Bianca. I have like my little like besties now on Twitter because you convinced me to come back to Twitter by accident.
You're welcome. She saw how much fun I was having.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, well, I'll do it for my other podcast, and then I'll just, like, creep around.
Realistically, this is a tangent. I understand when people say that Twitter is a hellhole, but, like, I'm in real life, I'm a social media person.
I quit because I got death threats before, just for anybody who...
Yeah, which is valid. Yeah. Anyone who just, like, passively is like, Twitter is a hellhole, I don't think you're pruning your social media garden enough. Because, like, I see very few hot takes that I don't agree with, and anytime I do, I mute the fuck out of that person. Like, you tailor your experience online. Now, if you are getting things that are beyond your control, like death threats, which is valid, I'm not going to minimize that, but, like, for the most part, if you're just, like, mad at the way, like, trolly people are talking, don't engage with them. Like, the algorithm learns what you like. So guess what? I don't get a bunch of sexist Game of Thrones hot takes. Because that's not the place I hang out in. So if you continue to engage in this shit, it's going to show, and you're going to keep getting more of the things that you don't like. So I love Twitter. It's one of the places that I can more freely be myself, because it does move so fast and it is so collaborative. But I am very empathetic to people who say they don't like it, but I wonder what about it they don't like.
And don't worry, I can't burn your Twitter after you die.
No, you can't, but I can delete it upon my death, and I can ask that it is deleted upon my death, which may not be done. Fun fact, as someone who used to work in the death care industry, as we are all gross, filthy millennials now, figure out what you want to happen to your data upon your death. Otherwise, someone's going to post your Zanga fanfiction, and you will be ruined posthumously. So, figure out, you can set up a legacy person for your Facebook that will be in control of your Facebook upon your death. You can engage with, there's like some kill switch directives on Google where all your data just gets kind of like voided. Start thinking about those things, because I have it in my will to burn my fan fiction, or at least to bury it with me, to seal it inside with me.
Okay, and I don't plan on digging it out. Yours like a Rossetti. Okay, now you can mark that square.
Yeah, now you can mark a pre-Raphaelite square. That doesn't exist yet, but I'm thinking about changing it. So unless you are willing to dig up my Draco Harry fanfic and thus exhume me, well, congratulations, then you've earned the prize. If you are so desperate to read Draco Harry smut that you are willing to desecrate my eternal rest, by all means. The fanfiction is the prize for ruining my tomb.
All right.
Though you'll never find my heart. My heart is meant to go somewhere else.
I'm going to give you some more facts about Jane Austen.
You don't want to know where my heart's supposed to go?
I don't want to know.
Okay, that's fair.
I do.
Lake Stern in Bavaria.
Oh.
So I can be with King Ludwig II, my favorite king.
Ludwig.
Please continue about Jane Austen.
So at one point in time, her father retired from his clergy life.
Can you do that?
You can if you're in the Anglican Church.
Oh, because they're lazy.
Yeah. I love the Anglicans. They're my favorite. Anyway,
I'm teasing.
So they retired and moved to the town of Bath, which Jane was more... She wasn't enthused with it at all. There are all these tales about how she supposedly fainted when her family said they were moving. And because she was unmarried, she had to go with her family. As someone who has stayed in Bath, there's not really a whole lot to do there other than go to the Roman baths, and that's like a one-time thing. I mean, for other people, I guess, if you're going to take the waters for your health. They moved to 4 Sydney Place, which was newly built and a flat walk to the city center, so her dad's arthritis wasn't crazy bad. And you can actually now rent this like an Airbnb overnight, which is kind of cool. So if you're a hardcore Austen fan, you can go to Bath and you can rent where they lived. So she never married, but she did accept one proposal, but just overnight. She told him afterwards that she could not love him and could not accept a marriage of convenience, much to her mother's chagrin. I almost said Mrs. Bennet because it's a very Mrs. Bennet feel. And we already talked about how Cassandra burned her letters, so we don't really know a whole lot more about that. She has a small travel writing box where she kept her writing while moving around. It's pretty much considered to be a holy relic to a lot of Austen fans, and it's at the home that they have set up for her now, like this one of her older homes that they've kept in good repair for the most part.
For the most part.
When she was published as by a lady and anonymously during her life.
Sounds about right.
Especially for that time period. As we kind of talked a little bit about, the family legend does try to make her look more like good, quiet Aunt Jane, and her family members were very protective of her. What's interesting is she kind of went out of print, I think, between 30 and 40 years after her death, and then she started to become very, very popular much later on. Which is interesting, too, because one of her fans was George III's son. So, that's a whole thing.
Who was a drunk and did a lot of opium.
Yes.
Sorry. I mean, that doesn't discredit his taste, just not a popular person.
Jane Austen made her own homebrew.
She made Bruno.
Which is awesome. And then there's a beer company, which I don't remember the name of, but they actually have a small independent blend called the Jane Austen made in her honor.
Can we also... I had another moment where I realized that you are a Yankee because you say aunt and not aunt.
Yes, I don't say aunt. Aunt. Yeah. In 1816, Austen was starting to feel really bad. She decided to ignore all the warning signs because evidently we were from the same strain of people. She slowly started to deteriorate. She had a lot of issues with her joints. She couldn't get up. Some folks thought she had Addison's disease. Others think it might have been Hodgkin's lymphoma. But in 2017, the British Library thought that she might have been poisoned by arsenic in the local drinking water. So that's something that's a fairly recent take, but we don't know. We do know that she died at age 41 with a handful of her books being published posthumously.
If she did die by arsenic, she is the second author that we have ascribed that death to.
Yeah, which is uncomfortable.
I mean, arsenic does exist in, like, chill levels in most things.
Peach fizz? Or is that cyanide?
That's cyanide.
Sorry.
I said too quickly to not sound like a murderer.
Okay, I made almond cookies for my office and walked around and told everybody who would listen, don't worry, there's nothing poisonous in this. It's just almond extract.
So when I took a forensic science class when I was in high school, and our final project was to commit a murder, and I was the only one that got away with it because I baked cyanide into cookies over a long period of time. So, fun fact, Amanda knows how to get away with murder.
I'm scared. So, Jane Austen has a lot of very famous fans, including Queen Victoria, even B.B. King. The weird ones are Osama bin Laden liked her work, and also a bunch of French anarchists who, before they died, they read a lot of Jane Austen and praised her.
For what? I don't know.
Mark Twain hated her writing so much that at one point in time he said he wanted to dig her up and beat her to death with her own femur. Which, that is like the most Mark Twain shit ever.
I kind of like that.
Rudyard Kipling took some of her credit and wrote a story in 1926 called The Janeites, in which soldiers from the First World War come together, form a Masonic lodge, and it's all based on their love for Jane Austen novels.
So it's like the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, but gay?
I guess. I kind of want to read it now. I'm like,
Rudyard Kipling is disgusting, and I hate him.
Oh, okay. I've never read anything.
The Jungle Book?
I haven't read The Jungle Book, which I feel like I've failed.
Okay, real talk, no one has read The Jungle Book.
I've watched the movie, the Disney movie.
Yeah.
And the one that they made in 96 with Lena Headey and pretended that they didn't make.
Are we going to just keep talking about Lena Headey?
About how much I love her.
She's beautiful.
How she can do horrible things to me and be okay.
Hashtag same. But yeah, Kipling is terrible. There's a lot of colonialism in The Jungle Book that's just very uncomfortable now. So, he's awful.
So, if you want to see some drafts of her manuscripts, the British Library is amazing. It's in London. You can go there. You can see copies of Alice in Wonderland. You can see some of the original Beatles music. They have a written copy of Beowulf, and it was one of a draft that they found. They have the Magna Carta. Sometimes they'll bring the other copy of the Magna Carta in, and then it's like, oh, look, they're all together. And then I get scared for a while that the library's going to burn down. But it's really cool.
Also go to the Tower of London and see the Raven Master General.
Yes! So if you don't know, there is a belief that if the ravens ever leave the Tower of London, the tower will fall.
And the only time that they did, there was an earthquake.
Yes. What's interesting now is they keep their wings clipped, and they have a breeding program. So.
It's not an aggressive clipping. They can still fly.
Yeah, they can still fly.
I'm defensive of the Raven Master. I apologize.
And I will say that they are very, very well taken care of.
And they're
ravens.
so big.
They're huge. They're massive.
If you ever want a balm in this cruel world, the Raven Master has a Twitter.
I didn't know that.
He has a Twitter, and he's very active, and he'll post the ravens, and they like getting pets. They like stealing food from tourists.
Yes, they do.
They love stealing food. There's Merlina and there's Poppy. Yes, the Raven Master has a Twitter.
I'm going to be best friends with him.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. They're very big. They're too...
They're massive.
They're too big.
And last time was 2013, and I was just like, holy crud.
Yeah, and they make a noise that sounds like condensed death. Like, they sound scary, but like, the Raven Master, he takes such good care of his birds. Like, they'll come up and, like, they'll just, like, honk and demand pets. Like, angry death cats that can fly. I love them. So, yes, you can visit, and they're great. There's many of them, and they're all very well taken care of. They eat better than some actual humans.
That's true.
And they will steal food from you.
Also, if you ever talk to a yeoman warder, which a lot of people refer to as beef eaters, like if you do Ceremony of the Keys, they are super chill and laid back. They look very, very serious. But if you take the time to talk to them, they will tell you some pretty freaking funny stories.
There are some fantastic documentaries about the yeoman porters on YouTube, which we'll probably link. We just revitalized our YouTube, so we're plugging it a lot because I did not spend 3 weeks uploading and encoding videos for nothing.
Yeah, that's another way to listen now. If you're like, I'm at work and I still have access to YouTube and I can't listen to my phone, but if I sneak my headphones into the computer jack, nobody can see it.
Exactly. Or you're using Bluetooth like most humans nowadays.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
You can listen to us on YouTube, but we'll probably start making a playlist of the things that we mentioned. Because we do mention a lot of video sources, because we're filthy millennials.
And we do include a lot of them on the website, but just to make it a little bit easier, we kind of want to do just a playlist so you can just hit it and go.
So we can, like Mr. Darcy wanted to?
Yes, right? Against his better judgment, evidently.
Do we need to go to, we have to talk about roofs.
We do. I do want to plug something in here. The reason that you've probably heard a lot about Jane Austen is when her stuff came out of, the publishing rights and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It became incredibly popular and money-making in the 90s and early 2000s to push her into the chick lit market. That's why all of a sudden you started seeing all these re-released covers in pastel colors.
And Bridget Jones' Diary.
Butterflies, huge books based on the Regency era. There's all sorts of dating guides, mystery novels, things about Jane's life and time period.
Okay, stop, collaborate, and listen. If you're taking dating, yes, I did just do that.
That's amazing.
If you're taking dating advice from any of these books, abandon all hope ye who enter here.
For real.
Like, please,
for real.
Please do not. Don't take any of this as gospel, please. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that. You can think it's a good time, and I'm not gonna shame you, but, like, do not go into the world hoping to find your own Mr. Darcy.
And even if you see the movie, it's Miss Austen's Regrets. It's based off of a lot of her letters. She has a whole part where she's talking to her niece in the movie, where she says, Mr. Darcy doesn't exist. He only exists in this world because I've made him up. And that's, like, basically the only way in the world to find a man like this is to make him up.
I mean, you can find a lot of random assholes out in the world. Some of them have money.
Redeemable assholes?
I don't think he's redeemable. I really don't. I don't think at the end that he's any better than he was at the beginning. I think that Emily lowers her standards. Or Elizabeth, whatever her name is.
You're still mad at the Brontes.
Jen. Random girl. I think she just lowers her standards to find him tolerable. Which is a word I've used a lot in this episode because Darcy uses it a lot. I don't think that he's reformed. I think standards got lowered. At the end of Babe, he'll do.
That'll do, Pig.
Yes! I think that's what happened.
That'll do, Jane, that'll do.
Yes! Where am I lying?
So one of the things that we found as well...
yes, you can donate a roof tile to rebuild her home museum.
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that I think we're considering doing.
We are considering doing it.
It's not expensive, but we're just poor.
But I'll go ahead and link to that as well on our website so you can see what we're talking about.
Yes.
So we actually got listener questions.
We did. Not as many as last time, but we did.
These are from Crystal, who's amazing. Thank you.
Hi, Crystal.
Does Jane Austen see herself as the heroine in her novels?
Yes.
I don't think so. Okay. I think she tends to make herself more side characters.
Okay.
And have her side characters kind of give observations and things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think she would see herself as Elizabeth Bennet.
I think she does only because I know the authorial moment that she was at the end of a bad proposal before this. So I would say yes. But like with any interpretation of things, we are allowed to have different answers.
So I like this one too. Are the men written as women of the time, looks and money only, or does she form them more completely? I feel like her female characters are more fleshed out than her male characters. Her male characters do kind of feel more like just, here's a stand-in, here's a sexy lamp.
Are you appropriating?
I am appropriating your sexy lamp.
I mean, they are lamps.
But they're very beautiful lamps.
They are very beautiful lamps.
They're beautiful, rich lamps that pay off bad people to marry 15-year-olds.
Okay, look. If this is the hill that you're going to die on, I have no choice but to respect you. But there are other far more questionable things in this work than that random dude.
That's true.
Thank you.
I do love this. Wickham, is he truly a villain or wrongly accused? I think villain. I think he's very, very in it for the money, and he's going to go and try and make himself look good. And maybe it's just because I've dated a lot of Wickhams. I'm wondering if that's just my interpretation.
I think so, and I'm also about to kick you out of Slytherin because I see no issue with this. I think you are dangerously close to being kicked out of our house.
Yeah, I'll probably end up in Ravenclaw.
Yeah, because I see no issue. Why is this evil? Why is this bad? Wouldn't you want to make an advantageous decision? It is simply chess. Why would I not want to put myself in a position where I could easily kill off my husband, inherit his money, and live comfortably for the remainder of my days? I'm
just going to sit this quietly in the corner.
Where I become Bellatrix Lestrange. Like... I mean, I'm not going to say wrongly accused. I don't think that he is blameless, but I think
he knows what he's doing.
Right, but I don't think it's any worse than any other guy during that time. I am truly showing off that I'm a Slytherin lass.
There is a follow-up to it. Are Wickham and Mr. Bennet villains? We kind of already answered that with Wickham. Mr. Bennet, I don't think so. I think he's just doing his best, and he is so fucking tired because Mrs. Bennet has ruined his life. Like, how many times in the book does he basically just, like, kind of shut her out, like, nope, don't want to hear this again, been dealing with this for 23 years, we're done.
Right, and then he just, like, dies, and it's like, finally, I can get some rest. Yeah, I think that we throw around villain a lot in these things, because I think it's because we're trying to find tension in this book, because there is none. This is a tensionless book. It is. There's something negative in saying that. There is no, like, raucous will they or won't they. We don't care.
I care.
I didn't care. I didn't care at all.
I was like...
I was hoping they wouldn't.
I flashed his Twitter. Oh, it's so beautiful. Ugh. That's what happens. Listen, my life is a horrid mess. So...
I mean, same, but that's why I want bad things to happen to bad people.
I mean, usually.
I'm a monster. This has been established.
So, there are a lot of adaptations.
Frankly, there's too many adaptations.
They basically make an adaptation every few years now.
It's sort of like Shakespeare a little bit, where like everything is based off like the same 5 Shakespeare plays. Mm-hmm. It does feel like this is one of those just like archetypal books that we keep adapting.
So, things that you can look for. There's a 1980s Pride and Prejudice.
But no one cares about, so let's get to Colin Firth.
1995, the Colin Firth adaptation is on Hulu right now.
It is.
And I need to tell all of you that are writing a book or writing a Jane Austen movie of some sort, the lake scene is not in the book. They included it in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and I'm like, oh Lord. Which is another adaptation, but it's way more enjoyable to watch as Lizzie trying to attack Mr. Darcy when he initially proposes with fireplace tools.
But also... Colin Firth in a wet linen shirt.
Wet linen shirt. It's beautiful. And as we've discussed on the internet, on Twitter, this is peer-reviewed science that it is just perfect and it can stay.
Yeah, like, I mean, this... I think I like this more as a movie than I do as a book, because as a book, it is just frightfully dry. And as a movie, there's at least nice scenery to look at, like Colin Firth's butt.
Yeah, no, that's
there is some quite nice scenery to look at.
Before we tossed a coin to our Witcher, that was... Anyway.
I think I hate you.
I know, a little bit. There was a 2003 version, a 2005 version with Keira Knightley, a 2005 version from India called Pride and Prejudice.
Okay, that sounds like it could be fun.
There's a book that just came out called Unmarriageable by Sonia Kamal, which is really good.
Lovely.
Death Comes to Pemberley. There's a whole series of Jane Austen mysteries. Miss Austen's Regrets, which I talked about a little while ago, and Becoming Jane, which is a book that was evidently closer to historical, but the movie is not historically accurate, so don't use it if you're writing a report on Jane Austen.
Yeah, basically. Most of these are fine. I think I like the Colin Firth adaptation again because there's some nice scenery to look at. Though otherwise I still... Oh, Bridget Jones's Diary.
Oh, and also Austen Land, Lost in Austin. Shit, sorry, there are so many.
There's
especially
a lot.
them 90s, though.
I mean, I would almost say it follows like a nostalgia cycle, but I
kind of like how we get a whole slew of vampire movies every few years.
Yeah, do I just explain what a nostalgia cycle is?
Please do.
So a nostalgia cycle you see in media where there's usually like a 20 year, a 30 year, and a 40 year. So like if you think about the 90s, we were really, really nostalgic for like the 60s. So it was a 30-year nostalgia cycle. And then like now in the 2000, well now we're in 2020, but like in the late 2000 teens, we were super into like 80s and 90s culture. So that was a 20-year, 30 cycle. It's basically just all that is old is new again. So similarly, we go through these cycles of like great storytelling, air quotes, like vampires come and go out of fashion depending on historical and cultural things going on. Like we saw the rise of the vampire in like the 90s and the 2000s because we had metaphors for like disease and shit like that. You'll see like mummy movies coming back into favor because we're concerned about like colonialism being bad now, finally. We're finally concerned that maybe colonialism was bad. How nice. So it does seem like we do go through these cycles of finding these stories romantic or not. I do think that the further we get into understanding feminism and how like the female mind works and what true equality looks like, I wonder if we will continue to lose books like this because it is, in as many ways as it is progressive, it is still to me a product of its time, which then inherently means it cannot be feminist to me. I'm sorry. Like, I think it's just such a product of its time that it can't be more than what it is. And that doesn't mean that it's not good. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. But I'm not willing to put it on a pedestal as other scholars are willing to do so.
Fair.
Thank you.
Did we have to study this in school? I didn't, but I was highly encouraged to read it by my teachers, and I hated it in high school. But now I actually quite enjoy it.
I mentioned this at the top of the show. I thought that I had. I guess apparently I haven't because I went through my essays because I've kept every essay that I wrote.
Wow.
Yes. I guess I didn't have to. All Britlit does kind of run together to me because it truly is bonnets all the way down, which is, I think, the last good joke John Green's ever made.
I kind of want to wear a bonnet. I almost bought one for this, and then I went, no, I'm good. It's too hot in this room.
How are you going to survive our first live show?
I don't know.
Like, I spend a lot of time in costume. I'm concerned about you. We'll have to get multiple.
I'm also just going to bring a fan.
We have a fan on our wish list if you'd like to help us alleviate the pain of the Halloween live show where you nearly watched two large women have heat stroke on camera. Where am I lying?
I don't know what I just did.
You went too far down. There we go.
All right. So we have a lot of resources. Obviously,
no more so than usual.
Crash Course, it's bonnets all the way down.
It's a 2-part episode. I think part 1 is better than part 2, but part 2 does go into some of the economics, so it's useful there.
There's a really great book by Claire Harmon called Jane's Fame, How Jane Austen Conquered the World. A lot of that is about how she kind of went out of print and then how her family's attempts and just people who genuinely loved her work brought it back. There's also what we were talking about earlier. It's Worsley, right?
Worsley, yes.
Yeah, who did Jane Austen Behind Closed Doors. There is a website called schmoop.com that has a whole thing about the Regency period. There's the Jane Austen House Museum.org.uk. We're going to link to the scene with Mr. Darcy in the water.
Because we have to.
Because we have to. There were all sorts of surprising Jane Austen facts. There's a lot. Okay. And there's even a whole thing from Mental Floss about how she did her own home brewery. So
I also just love that I use the word Pruno, assuming that everyone would know what that word means. Pruno's prison wine. You usually make it in the toilet with something that ferments easily like oranges.
There you go.
You're welcome.
Our next book is
Hamlet. I'm actually really excited about this.
I am too, because I get to watch like Andrew Scott and David Tennant do their interpretations.
There's a fun play with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh.
Who I think is attractive?
I feel like it's kind of like Adam Driver. It's the light that you see.
I don't think Adam Driver is attractive.
Okay. Adam Driver was attractive to me in the last Star Wars when he smiled, and every other time I was like, oh.
I think that Cumberbatch is more attractive than Adam Driver.
That's fair.
Okay.
So if you want to find us on social media, you can find us at Unfortunately Required Reading on Facebook, Unfortunately RR on Twitter, Unfortunately Required on Instagram, unfortunatelyrequiredreading.com.
Yep.
And if you'd like to suggest a book for the podcast or talk to us, we're at unfortunatelyrequiredreading@gmail.com.
If you'd like to contribute to our wine and cheese fund, or in this case, the scone fund, please consider sponsoring your two favorite drunk literary